This is lesson 7.3, percent and estimation. Refer to the graph below. Question number 1, what fraction of women took lessons at school? Well, if we look at the graph, it says women down here is the purple. Here's lessons at school. It says 30%. Well, 30% means 30 out of 100. That simplifies to 3/10. So that's the fraction of women that took classes at school. If 200 women were surveyed, how many of them took lessons at school? Well, we're going to take 3/10 of, or times, 200. We can simplify here and divide by 10. Simplify here, divide by 10. 3 times 20 is 60. Number 2, use a fraction to estimate the number of men who took lessons at school. In this case, it's 26%. Now they're asking us here to estimate. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 26% and we're going to round that to 25%, because we can easily write that as a fraction, which is 1/4, 25 over 100, which simplifies to 1/4. So we're going to take 1/4 times that same 200, simplify here and here, dividing both of those by 4, and so our answer is 50 men took lessons, music lessons at school. Sometimes an exact answer is not needed when using percents. One way to estimate the percent of a number is to use a fraction like we just did. In a recent year, quarterback Carson Palmer completed 62% of his passes. He threw 520 passes. Again, it says about how many did he complete. So our original problem is 62% of 520. We're going to round both of those numbers, 62% to 60. 520, we're going to leave that at 520. I personally wouldn't do that. I would change it to 500. 60% is 60 out of 100, which simplifies to 3/5. 3/5 times 520 is about 312. Notice the wavy equal sign, which means approximately equal to. So Carson Palmer completed about 312 of 520 passes. Example A, reptiles. Box turtles have been known to live for 120 years. American alligators have been known to live 42% as long as box turtles. About how long can an American alligator live? Well, our original problem is 42% of 120. We're going to round 42% to 40%, which we're going to write as a fraction of 40 over 100, or 4 over 10, or 2 over 5. So it's 2/5 times 120. Simplify here. This divides in here 24 times. 2 times 24. So the American alligator can live about 48 years. Another method for estimating the percent of a number is to find 10% of the number, because that's very easy to do, and then multiply it. For example, 70% equals 7 times 10%. So 70% of a number equals 7 times 10% of the number. In example number 2, Marita decided to leave a 20% tip on a restaurant bill of $14.72. About how much money should she tip the restaurant server? You need to estimate 20% of $14.72. Well, 20% is 2/10 or 1/5. We're going to round $14.72 to 15. So 1/5 of 15 is about $3. To do that same problem using our second method, find 10% of 1472. Again, we're going to round to 15. 10% means the decimal 0.1. 0.1 times 15 is $1.50. Because we're doing 20%, we're going to multiply 2 times $1.50 and end up with the same answer that we did up above, which is $3. Dante plans to put 80% of his paycheck into a savings account. his paycheck this week was $295. About how much money will he put into his savings account? Well, we're going to say 80% of $300, and we're going to find 10% of $300, which would be 2 decimal places, or 1 decimal place, I guess, to the left. So 10% of $300 is $30. We then take $30 times 8 to get 80%, and we get $240. Interesting method. Percents greater than 100 or less than 1. If we have a number that's our percent greater than 100, we're going to round that, of course. 122% of 50 becomes 120% of 50. We find 100% of 50, which simply means multiply 50 times 1. Then we're going to find 20% of 50, which is the fraction 1/5. 20% is the fraction 1/5. So 1/5 of 50 is 10. So the 50, which is 100% of 50, and the 10, which is 10% of 50, gives us 60. So 122% of 50 is about 60. 1/4% is less than 1%. So what we're going to do is we're going to find 1% of 600. In this case, we're rounding 589 to 600. As a decimal, 1% is 1/100th, so it's 0.01, which means move the decimal point 2 places to the left and get 6. So 6 is 1% of 600. So 1/4 of that would be 1.5 times our original 600, or about 1.5. So 1/4 of 6 is 1.5. Example C, 175% of 200. Well, 100% of 200 is 200. 75% equals 3/4. So 3/4 times 200. Simplify here by dividing by 4 gives us 50. So 3 times 50 is 150. So our original 200 plus 50, 200, which is 100% of 200, plus 150, which is 75% of 200, gives us an answer of 350. Example D, we're going to say 300% of 45. We're going to round 45 to 50. Well, 100% of 50 is 50. So 300% would be 3 times 50, or 150. Example E, 25/100ths of a percent. We're going to round to 1%. We're going to use 1% of 800. 1% of 800 is 8. 0.25% is 1/4. So that's times 8, which gives us an answer of 2. So 25/100ths% of 789 is about 2. In recent years, there were about 200 million people in the U.S. with cell phones. Of those, about 0.5% use their phones as an MP3 player. Estimate the number of people who use their phones as an MP3 player. 0.5% is half of 1%. 1% of 200 million is 2 million. So if 0.5% is half of 2 million, our answer then is 1 million. Last year, 639 students attended a summer camp. We're going to take that 639, we're going to round it to 600. Of those who attended this year, 0.9% attended last year. So we're going to take 0.9%. We're going to round that to 1%. So 1% of 600 equals 6. 9/10 times 6 would be 5.4. Check your progress. Example number 1. 1/2 or 50%, 52%, we're going to round to 50% of 10 means half of 10, which is 5. Number 2, 7%, we're going to round to 10%. 10% of 20 is 1/10 of 20, which is 2. Example number 3. We're going to round 38% to 40%. We want 40% of 62. We're going to round 62 to 60. So we've got 4/10, which simplifies to 2/5 times 60. 5 goes into 60 12 times. 12 times 2 is 24. So 38% of 62 is about 24. Number 4. 79% of 489, we're going to round 79% to 80%, which as a fraction is 4/5. We're going to round 489 to 500. We're going to simplify here. We get 100 here. So 79% of 800 or 489 is about 400. 79% of 489 is approximately 400. Number 5, we'll do one more on this page before we go on to the next page. Number 5 says 151%, 151%, we're going to round to 150. So we're going to do 100% of 70, which is 70. We're going to do then 50% of 70, which is half times 70, or 35. So 70 plus 35 is 105. So 150% of 70 is about 105. A couple more. Number 7. Bicycle store increases its prices by 23%. About how much more will a customer pay for a bicycle that originally cost $200? Well, 23%. We're going to round to 25%, which is 1/4 times 200, which gives us an increase of about $50. Number 8. Of the 78 teenagers at a youth camp, 63% have birthdays in the spring. About how many have birthdays in the spring? Well, 63%. We're going to round that to 60%, which is 3/5. 6/10, which simplifies to 3/5. We're going to round 78 to 80. So we're going to multiply there. We get what? 16 here, which means about 48 students had birthdays in the spring. So 63% of 78 is about 48. And our last one, number 9. About 0.8% of the land in Maine is federally owned. If Maine is 19,847,680 acres, we're going to find 1% of 20 million. Which means we move our decimal point 2 places to the left, which gives us 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros, or 200,000. Take that times 8 times 200,000. Gives us about 160,000. So 0.8% of 20 million is about 160,000 acres. At this point, you should quit the video. Type www.nicu.net in your web address and go to the NICU page, log in with your student number. Your password is your student number followed by your last name, and take lesson quiz 7-3. Thank you.